Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And as we were talking in our pre-chat with my guest, this topic could not be more timely. We're going to be talking about how to deal with toxic people. Oh my gosh. Like I said, this could not be more timely. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sam Adeyemi to our program today. Welcome, Dr. Sam. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Deb, for having me here.
Perfect. We discovered that we are both in Atlanta. We should have been doing this live, right?
Right?
Well, let me tell folks just a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. So Atlanta-based Dr. Sam Adeyemi leads leaders. More than 3.8 million CEOs and high-performing individuals follow Dr. Sam on top social media sites. Dr. Sam is the author of Shifts, 6 Steps to Transform Your Mind and Elevate Your Leadership. He is also the author of Dear Leader, your flagship guide to successful leadership. He is the principal consultant of Sam Adeyemi GLC Inc., a leading global leadership consulting company with the mission to raise high-impact leaders to shape the fortunes and destinies work too, but destinies of nations. Dr. Sam holds a doctorate in strategic leadership from Virginia's Regent University and is a member of the International Leadership Association. He and his wife, Nika, have 3 children and founded the Daystar Christian Center in Lagos, Nigeria. So again, Dr. Sam, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you.
I love it. Well, you have had quite the past, and I think that people always are very interested in how it is that you got to where you are today. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Deb. So I love to talk about how I became a leader.
Okay.
Because I never thought I was one or had the qualities to be one.
Okay.
So when I was a teenager in my early teen years, if you found me in a group and you asked someone to volunteer to be the leader of the group, I would be the last person to do it.
You did not raise your hand.
Never. I am introverted.
Okay.
So I used to be extremely shy.
Mm-hmm.
But then somewhere along the line, a reverend gentleman in my church said to me, there's something about you. Something about you. Read this book. And it was a book on leadership.
Okay.
And the author, challenged the belief that few people are born to lead, everybody else is born to follow. He said, no, if you ever read the Bible, you see there that God created man in his image. Now, if everyone is created in God's image and we're given dominion, he said, then it means that we have some capacity to influence people and the environment. So he said, everyone has leadership potential. He listed the qualities of a leader and said, whoever you are, go through this list, you will see you have some of them already. The ones you don't have, you can cultivate. Now, that spoke to me directly. I realized I had some of the qualities already. Oh, wow. The ones I did not have, I could cultivate. Of course, one of the ones I did not have was communication skills.
Okay.
I found it difficult to express myself. That's why I thought the people who could easily express themselves, who were friendly, those were the ones got out to be leaders, not people like us.
And you were shy.
Right, and I was shy. Very quiet. So what did I do? Oh, I bought How to Win Friends and
One of the best books, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Mm-hmm.
I underlined almost every sentence. I practiced the
Mm-hmm.
things I found, and honestly, it transformed my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born into the family of a civil servant. My dad worked for the government.
Okay.
Somewhere along the line, he resigned.
Mm-hmm.
He retired and started his own business.
Mm-hmm.
He was a building contractor.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
That influenced my study in civil engineering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I already had a place in his business. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to have to
Right.
do any
That was
job.
going to be father and son. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The problem is just that by the time I was through college, the business was not there anymore.
Oh, no.
Something had gone wrong with
Mm-hmm.
the national economy and so
Mm-hmm.
on. I wasn't getting jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to search for a job. And that
Mm-hmm.
was so hard. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote so many applications, attended
Mm-hmm.
so many interviews, 6 months, 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't getting a job. It was a very
Mm-hmm.
frustrating experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Almost 2 years before I got a job. But during that time, I despaired. It looked
Mm-hmm.
like the future was dark. I couldn't
Right.
see the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking myself, is there any method? Are there any principles, any
Mm-hmm.
strategies that at least one can apply and be
Mm-hmm.
sure that one will turn out well?
Mm-hmm.
That was when I began to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought this used copy of Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do.
Ah, perfect. Mm-hmm.
And it was transformational.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a line in there that said attitudes are more important than facts.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, what?
Mm-hmm.
No, facts are sacred. The fact is
Mm-hmm.
the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a
Right.
job. I don't have money. What are you
You
telling
were an
me?
engineer. That's part of that, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. 1 mile is 1 mile, right?
Mm-hmm.
One
Mm-hmm.
pound is 1 pound to an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had to read it over and over,
Mm-hmm.
reflect deeply,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually I read more books and I
Mm-hmm.
eventually found out that's it.
Mm-hmm.
What you think and how you feel,
Mm-hmm.
they are more important than your current circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, your circumstances will have to adjust themselves
Mm-hmm.
to agree with what you think,
Mm-hmm.
how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So that had begun to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then this leadership thing also came in.
Mm-hmm.
So my life started changing. I got a
Mm-hmm.
job, yes,
Mm-hmm.
quite all right. I
Mm-hmm.
began to get jobs, I began to
Mm-hmm.
do well. And then I just got this deep inspiration one day to go on radio, to go on the media, and to
Mm-hmm.
teach people those principles I
Mm-hmm.
was learning and applying.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And on one hand, there was a question on my mind. What business do you have to teach people how to
Right,
succeed?
right. The
Are
whole
you,
imposter syndrome thing, right?
thank you. Are you successful yet?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
went ahead,
Mm-hmm.
went on radio,
Mm-hmm.
and it was boom. I mean, this was back in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where there's a lot of deprivation and so
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of people were going through the same thing I had gone
Right.
through,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I had the broadcast had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
following. Eventually, I moved on to TV.
Mm-hmm.
Then, while teaching success, again, I came across the issue of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
At the highest level of success,
Mm-hmm.
actually turn the attention, the focus away from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You put it on other people
Right.
and you empower other
Mm-hmm.
people to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I started the broadcast, my
Mm-hmm.
wife and I, like you read in my bio, founded
Mm-hmm.
a church
Mm-hmm.
in Lagos, Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And I was applying those principles of leadership focused on
Mm-hmm.
empowering people, training people,
Mm-hmm.
delegating to people, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. The church has some 40,000 people attending the services every
Wow.
weekend now,
Mm-hmm.
online and on
Mm-hmm.
site,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when I had to do my graduate studies, that's why I went for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I did my master's and I did
Mm-hmm.
my doctoral program in strategic
Mm-hmm.
leadership. With time, I got to appreciate the outsized impact
Mm-hmm.
of people that occupy leadership positions,
Mm-hmm.
right? from the business owner who has 5 employees,
Mm-hmm.
the person supervising 100, 1,000, maybe to a governor
Mm-hmm.
who is responsible for millions of
Mm-hmm.
people, or a
Mm-hmm.
president, tens of millions or
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
I decided, okay, I think the best use of my time is going to be advising leaders,
Mm-hmm.
especially C-suite leaders.
Mm-hmm.
23 years ago, to express this passion for leadership and having spotted this huge gap, especially in Nigeria and Africa,
Mm-hmm.
I started a leadership school,
Ah,
the Daystar Leadership Academy, we call it,
oh, I love it.
right? And now we have over 50,000 people who have come through the school. Yeah.
Nice.
The last 23 years, I've been teaching, taking
Mm-hmm.
classes. I still
Mm-hmm.
took a class
Mm-hmm.
this week.
We should always be
Adeyemi.
learning. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the major characteristics of leaders,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we're always investing in
Mm-hmm.
our thinking and
Mm-hmm.
our capacity
Mm-hmm.
to solve problems
Mm-hmm.
and to add value to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I found myself moving from that shy young man
Mm-hmm.
to someone who now speaks at conferences all
Mm-hmm.
over the world, someone who now advises
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, right, and leaders in government,
Mm-hmm.
to someone who now authors books, who's now an author.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm particularly excited that my latest book, Shifts, which you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
published by a major publisher,
Mm-hmm.
Wiley, and is being distributed all over the world.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I love this whole concept. And one of the things that I'm hearing from you is leadership is not tied to a title, right? Sometimes the founder, the director, the president, the whatever isn't always the leader. And we mix those two up. And I think part of it comes from obviously, corporate types of setting. And I'll just this happened to me. I was with a very, very large company here in the United States, and we were actually an international company. And I was promoted to the director of communications. So I this with zero leadership training, and it was a challenge.
That's it.
And when I had issues or positives also, right? I didn't know how to deal with those. And hopefully I did okay. I mean, but a lot of times we do find that the leaders are maybe exactly like you. They're the quiet leaders who don't have that official title, but they have that wisdom. And more importantly, they have people who trust and respect them.
Thank you so much, Deb. Now, that speaks to something that has come from my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
I say all the time, everyone can lead.
Mm-hmm.
I say, why?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people still hold that wrong
Right.
concept in their minds
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that it's the guys at the top only that are
Mm-hmm.
leaders. The rest of us are not
Mm-hmm.
leaders. And with that, they
Mm-hmm.
abandon their potential,
Mm-hmm.
their responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
develop
Mm-hmm.
and cultivate their leadership
Right.
potential.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask me now, I say, well, I will define leadership as the ability to influence one or more people to achieve goals.
Mm-hmm.
So when we move the definition away from position and title
Mm-hmm.
and we put it on influence, then we realize influence happens at all
Mm-hmm.
levels.
Right.
How do you
Mm-hmm.
describe the influence of parents on their
Mm-hmm.
children?
Mm-hmm.
It's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Or teachers in school,
Mm-hmm.
right? In fact, I say to people, if you persuaded your friend to go with you to buy candies when
Mm-hmm.
you were a child, you led your friend.
Right. Yeah, you were the leader. Mm-hmm.
You were the leader there, right? So now you made a very important point about how you rose to the top
Mm-hmm.
without having been taught leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a powerful thing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of business owners, especially founders,
Mm-hmm.
tell me that some of their best performing people have poor people skills.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They bring in a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
but then they hurt a lot of people in the process,
Mm-hmm.
right? So And the business owner knows the greatest assets of the business are the people.
Right.
Right? So when you're losing good hands who have to leave, who have to resign and exit because of a toxic boss, right? You know you're losing money in the process. So it's important for us to know as leaders that we are not the only ones that are leaders. Actually, everybody else on our team is a leader.
Right. Right.
Or has leadership potential, and we actually need to teach them leadership. Some people are promoted into, like, I have a course, an online course, how to become a strategic leader. Because I created that program because I found out when people are being promoted in an organization, sometimes when they're promoted into the executive grade, they're actually not taught the skills
Right.
for functioning at that level. Now they're supposed to move from doing mostly operations to doing strategic work,
Right.
looking at the numbers, interpreting them, conducting meetings. Conducting meetings is a skill. Sometimes meetings are a total waste of time.
Yeah, we didn't even need that meeting, right?
In the first place. Some of them are not even necessary, right? So people need to be taught. A leader is strategic when they can, analyze spot strengths, spot weaknesses, right? Spot what is working, spot what is not working, apply the Pareto principle. What's the 20% of our efforts or products or even clients that are giving us 80% of our results, and to then be able to make decisions. A strategic leader creates success for their organization or team, not only in the present, but also in the future. Right? They are sensitive to changes going on, not only within their organization, but even also externally that could have impact on their result.
Right.
People need to be taught these things.
Right. Yeah.
But
we
then,
might have the skill to do the job, which is why we get promoted, right? But then, yeah, it's or we think, hey, I've got this great idea for a company, so I'm going to start a company.
Right.
But then we don't know how to lead the people who work with us, for us, all those various things.
That is really the big deal, the people skills. I came across some data many years ago that said it was discovered that when you are still on the factory floor, let's say a glue plumber or electrician or secretary or so, that 75% of your success depends on your technical skills. Only 25% depends on people skills.
Right.
In other words, if you are very good with the technical skill, you still do well. You can be successful,
Right.
even if you don't have people skills that much. Then they said when they move you to supervisor or manager level, then your success depends on 50% technical skills and 50% people skills. So if you don't develop the people skills, you begin to have problems.
Right.
When you hit executive grade, then your success depends on 75% people skills and 25% technical.
Right. Right. And we've all worked for those people who have those titles, right? Who were just really bad leaders. And like you said, people don't care about titles. It was, oh gosh, probably 20 years ago. I went to a conference. It was an E-Women Network conference, and the speaker happened to be the founder, Sandra Yancey. And she said, when you introduce yourself to someone, don't say your title because they don't care. And I had just started my business and I was like, oh, I'm not to say I'm the founder of, because we're proud of that, right? But what they care about is, can they do the job? That's all they care about. They don't care that you're the president, the founder, the director, the grand poobah, any of that. Can you do the job?
Right. Exactly. So at the end of the day, people care about the effect that you have on them,
Right.
the impact that you have on them. Are you helping them to get better as individuals? Right? And are you modeling the right values for them?
Right.
When you declare the vision for the organization, are your actions reflecting that vision? When you declare or mention the values for the organization. Are you modeling those values,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, will working with you take them to where they want to get to in life?
Right. I love that. I love that. You know, and it's not about just the work, right? You know, and you know, I was looking at your bio and I love this because it is so much about everything else that makes the good leader. You know, do you value that people have families and that they need time with them? You know, I mean, there's so many things that are not work related, but actually pertain, and that's tricky because you know people, there's HR rules, right? You're not supposed to ask
Mhm.
some of those questions. um but
Right.
you can still say, you know, Dr. Sam, I know you've got 3 kids and you need to go home early on Friday because it's soccer day. We're going to set it up so that you can go home early to watch your kids, you know. And then but like you said, I have to model that too, and that I think is the hitch. Like we might see the boss leaving early, coming in late, right? Ooh, that's an icky one.
Hmm.
Or, you know, all of those things. But then if they don't, you know, so the positive things, you know, like if they're coming in late, we don't want that, right? But if they stay late, if they are very family oriented, all those things, those have to transfer then down to those that they're working with.
Absolutely, Deb. So this is important.
Mm-hmm.
People ask me, okay, so if you were to choose the most important quality a leader should have,
Mm-hmm.
what would it be?
Mm-hmm.
I say love.
Mm-hmm.
Love people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
now that's one word you're not likely to hear in
Mm-hmm.
the boardroom that
Right.
often.
Because that has no ROI.
Thank you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it actually does. And that's the thing that people need to remember. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Have empathy,
Mm-hmm.
care for people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Humans are the most valuable
Mm-hmm.
assets on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize their value,
Mm-hmm.
right? Care deeply enough
Mm-hmm.
about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be interested in what's going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what you said.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that happens outside
Mm-hmm.
of the scope of work that
Mm-hmm.
impacts directly on the
Mm-hmm.
job.
Right.
If somebody's child is sick
Mm-hmm.
or their spouse is sick,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to affect their
Mm-hmm.
productivity,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then if you won't allow someone to go on vacation,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to have downtime.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no recreation, there's going to be a big problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is sick, they're not going to be productive.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There's that need to be interested. If
Mm-hmm.
if somebody's not looking good, there's a need,
Mm-hmm.
or it's showing on their face,
Mm-hmm.
there's a need to ask, is
Right.
everything okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a need to be interested in their family,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when people ask me, so how do you get people to be loyal to you? I say,
Mm-hmm.
you be loyal to them first.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Care for them.
Mm-hmm.
Be
Mm-hmm.
interested
Right.
in their success, in their
Right.
well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Those things really matter. It may
Mm-hmm.
sound
Mm-hmm.
soft,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Right.
Everything builds on that. You know, we had something as we were coming out of COVID, we
Mm-hmm.
had the great resignation
Mm-hmm.
that people were moving from the
Right.
jobs a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I say that it's because COVID was like a storm that revealed the foundations.
Right.
It
Mm-hmm.
revealed the values of
Mm-hmm.
leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And many leaders showed that they valued money
Mm-hmm.
over human life.
Right.
They valued power over human life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people got that message really clear.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were
Right.
coming out of COVID, people
Mm-hmm.
were telling themselves, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take care of my life. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to take care of
Right.
myself. I'm going to
Right.
plan for myself.
Yeah.
Right? And they were moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said, you know, all the poor micromanagers of the world, when all of a sudden their employees were working from home and not under their little thumbs, their little heads just exploded, right? You know, because they
Whoa.
wanted to be in control. And I
Right.
remember I had one person who, you know, and this was fairly early on in the shutdown. They said, we don't trust them to get the work done. And I said,
Wow.
did you trust them when they were in the office? And so
Mhm.
there's two answers to that, right? If they
Right.
say yes, then you trust them now. If they say, well, no, well, that's a totally different situation. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, you know, And we saw the companies that wanted to count the keystrokes. I had people say, "Oh yeah, I put my kid in front of my computer and 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 or maybe they had kids at home, and so they're having to do school with them. So that meant they were working in the evenings. Did they get the work done? That really should have only been pretty much the only criteria that they were looking at. But people were like, but I need them to work 8 hours a day. Well, maybe they don't need to work 8 hours a day.
Right.
And all of those things. And so I think that was one of the things, as you said, that people went, nope, I'm not going back. This is not worth it to me. Or I'm going to go back and be looking for something else right away.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that some organizations reported that their people were more productive working from home.
Right.
And the employees themselves were happy because, like you said, they could be there for their families.
Right. They didn't have the commute. They could work their own hours. They didn't have people pestering them with, all sorts of things that didn't really matter, right? And I understand that the camaraderie of being in an office, all of those things, that's important also. But there's just so many things to have to consider, and I think that's where we've really seen when they have said, okay, you're coming back into the office. Some people went, okay, fine, I like that. Most people said nope. And I think that was one of the things, and they like that freedom. And you mentioned it at the very start, that word empowerment, right? We need to empower them to do what they need to do to get the job done.
That's it. Bottom line, things are changing now. Like COVID forced us to appreciate technology more.
Right.
Like we had Zoom,
Right.
we had the other platforms before COVID, but we did not leverage them enough.
Right.
So now we actually can do a whole lot more in less time and with less commute, right?
Right.
So we leaders need to adjust. Leaders, we need to adjust our mind,
Right.
right? There's this story that happened in Nigeria. A company employed a gentleman to be a graphics designer. And then on the day he was to resume work, he did not show up at work.
Uh-oh.
Now the head of HR called him, said, "Excuse me, have you forgotten you were supposed to resume work today?" He said, "Sure." He said, "So why are you not here?" He said, "Where?" He said, "At our office." He said, "What am I supposed to do at your office?" "I'm a graphic designer."
Right. I just need my computer.
I need my computer. I thought you would send whatever work you have to me. I'll do the job. I send it back to you. Job done. What do I need to do in your office? And the manager was shocked. Of course, with that, I speak also about multi-generational
Oh, yes.
generations, because it's like they were on two different planets speaking two different languages.
Or like 5 now, right?
Thank you.
Right.
Right. So we need to be flexible in the current day and time, and focus more on what is important, on people, and on the results.
Right. And so that brings us back to, what we want to talk about is the toxic leaders. And it's funny because those are actually two different terms, right? If you are a good leader, you are not toxic. I mean,
Right.
that's the whole thing. But just define for us what you mean when you say toxic.
Well, the word toxic actually means poisonous. So,
Right.
so it means that leaders never leave you the same. And leaders have transformative power on the people that we lead. Leaders are practically catalysts. So a leader will affect people whether positively or negatively. So the toxic leader is the one that is affecting people negatively. The toxic leader is the one that is hurting people's emotions, pushing people's emotions, especially the negative ones, to the extreme, right? They're the ones literally frustrating the people they lead. They're the ones annoying the people that they lead. They're the ones creating confusion and doubt in the people that they lead. And it's usually because of issues that have to do with the leader
Right.
themselves.
Self-esteem in many cases.
A lot of insecurity. Yes. Low self-esteem. So a leader is meant to empower people, right? You're meant to delegate to them, delegate tasks, but also delegate authority. You're meant to teach them what you know, and your objective should be to make them as good as you are. But when a leader has self-esteem, the progress of the subordinate becomes a threat.
Right. Yeah. They're going to take my job.
Exactly. Now that becomes a big problem because then they frustrate the progress of the person they're leading. Sometimes they do not take their ideas, if most of the time, not take their ideas and they do not pass their ideas up.
Right.
And
or they take credit for it.
Thank you. When they take the idea up, they take the credit for the idea. Things like that. You can't afford to outshine them, right? So that's what we mean. Some people are just simply narcissistic. Some leaders are just narcissists, and they make life at work hell.
Right.
That they lead.
Right. Yeah, and we've probably all had those type of leaders. Whether it's a paid position or a volunteer position that we're doing. I had a boss many years ago, and his was all self-esteem. Now there was probably some narcissistic behavior in there too, but he was well over 300 pounds. And he loved being the boss. And if you looked up bully in the dictionary, there was his picture. And he just loved, he loved intimidating people and using bad language. And this was, long enough ago that, it wasn't terribly frowned on like it is now. Right. And I remember, and I was his office manager. So I was pretty much second in charge. And now this red hair, I mean, it might be enhanced now, but I am a redhead. So, I'm one of those, I'm going to stand up for myself. Right. And I'm an only child raised by, parents who said, you're strong and tough. You can do this. And I remember, like I said, he would swear a lot and he would call women the B word.
Wow.
And I told him, I hadn't been there long when I witnessed that. And I told him, I said, you get one of that with me. And he kind of looked at me and I said, you can call me that once. You call me that twice and I own your company.
Oh, wow.
And he did call me that one time. And all I did was hold up one finger and he apologized, but then he always had all these excuses, right? Well, this is this is the way I've always done it.
Right.
And true, and everybody let them get away with that. And I think that's the big thing when we're dealing with toxic people, whether it's, as a leader or, you've got somebody on your team who is toxic, we tend to go, okay, we don't want to deal with it. So we let them get away with it.
Right.
And then they're like, ooh, well, this worked once. So how do we, because you also, dealing with them, calling them out, oh, that's not a good thing either. Right. So when we have somebody who is just kind of consistently that naggy, complaining, sabotaging, whatever type of person, how do we deal with those people?
Thank you. It's what you did. It's what you did. You set boundaries. You set boundaries. So there's a way leaders like that, especially the ones that are bullies, there's a way they condition the environment. There's a way they give you the subtle cues. This is how I want this to be done here. And people who don't have the esteem then suck up to them, help them to create that environment. Right. And play the sycophant, right? Well, since this is the way the boss wants it, then I give it to him or I give it to her, right? In the process, they're not helping the leader, they're not helping themselves at all. The likelihood also is that somewhere along the line, the person who is acquiescing, the person who is trying to put up with it breaks. Somewhere along the line, they just can't take it anymore. Right. And for some, their health may break down. They may burn out, they may have a mental breakdown, or even a physical breakdown sometimes.
Right. Yeah, because they're always kind of churning, right? And so their body is always going, eh. And so their blood pressure is high, ulcers, heart conditions, all of those things.
Thank you. The emotions affect our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So the body will be storing up the negative energy,
Mm-hmm.
knotting ups, and then things begin to go wrong. The body, of course,
Mm-hmm.
secretes
Mm-hmm.
chemicals it should not be
Mm-hmm.
secreting and all that. And like you said, blood pressure is going up and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So our first encouragement to the person who has a toxic boss
Mm-hmm.
is, well, you were not part of the formation of the boss,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
part
It
of their
might have come
childhood.
when they were a tiny child, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So they may have had parenting issues.
Mm-hmm.
They went through whatever trauma they
Mm-hmm.
went through in life. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But as it is,
Mm-hmm.
you can't allow that to now come and affect your own life,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're there to work and to
Mm-hmm.
be paid, not to have your life broken.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you're not helping anybody
Mm-hmm.
by submitting
Mm-hmm.
to this
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere, toxic
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere, and playing the sycophant. You
Right.
need to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said earlier on, there's no point shaming the boss publicly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because that's just going to make it worse.
That makes it worse. For a
Mm-hmm.
person with insecurity and so
Mm-hmm.
on, they're going to make you lose.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have that
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
where you call their attention to their negative behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If the person has any sense of shame at all,
Mm-hmm.
they will admit something is wrong with what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in any case, they'll become more careful with you.
Mm-hmm. Right. They won't call you that B word.
Right. Excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like you calling me that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Right.
It just doesn't sit with
Mm-hmm.
me at all. I respect you a
Mm-hmm.
lot, and I just want to be safe in
Mm-hmm.
this space to do the work that you
Mm-hmm.
give me to do.
Right. Yeah. I had a coworker one time
Mhm.
who always called me honey.
Okay.
We didn't have an HR department. And I swear he called me honey because he couldn't remember my name. My name is not that hard, right? Um, but yeah, he always called me honey.
Right?
And so he called me honey in front of the boss one time. And now the boss, he was very good, very, very good.
Okay.
And so I called the gentleman sweetie.
Okay.
And he understood he had overstepped. And he actually came to me later and he said, I'm really sorry. He said,
Mm.
I think of you fondly. And it's kind of like how, here we are in the South, we call people honey down here, right? Honey, can I
Right?
help you? Hun, all those things. And he said he never really thought of it as a negative
Mm.
until he had it happen to him. And and that was as far as it went. I mean, I never had to say anything more. He would go, huh? And then realize nope, he wasn't supposed to say honey, right?
Right?
But it had been a habit, and again, people had let him get away with.
Exactly. And um, there's something you also did that is important.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to stay calm.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. If
Yeah.
I'd yelled at him, don't call me that, and it's funny because calling somebody honey, you wouldn't think of as being toxic. But to me, it was putting me down, which then
Mm.
meant that it was toxic.
Right. So if um if you lose your cool,
Mm-hmm.
it empowers, especially if you're dealing with a narcissist,
Mm-hmm.
right? It gives them control over you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So they know what to do to
Mm-hmm.
get you to just lose your temper, to lose
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
composure. And they'll do it over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over again.
Right.
It's good to maintain your composure,
Mm-hmm.
to speak in a cool, calm
Mm-hmm.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes also, uh, it's good to limit interaction where
Mm-hmm.
you can,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you can. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, if you're working with the same boss, if you're in the same office,
Mm-hmm.
that may be tough to do. But and the interesting thing is, if they exercise that control over you on the
Mm-hmm.
job, they likely want to take it outside the job to call you
Mm-hmm.
at
Right.
unusual hours.
Yeah, they're going to expect that you respond to an email at 10 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Even for something that is not very, very urgent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important again, you set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
and then you define the interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Very,
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Right. And again, it's not just for your benefit, it's for others too, right? Because they may or may not be, there are times where it is very much they're targeting one person. They've decided, for whatever reason. But if they're, toxic and negative and things like that, it's going to affect everyone. And of course, now the problem is that there's so much going on in the world right now that we all, emotions are high on many things, whether it's the wars that are going on, politics, and things can devolve very quickly when you start having those conversations.
True, true. I mean, what you get on the news is just it's negative.
Mm-hmm.
The news is meant
Mm-hmm.
to scare you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh yeah. Because then you're going to listen more, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's just so much and the platforms for distributing
Mm-hmm.
information, they've exploded now.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Right.
right on your phone
Mm-hmm.
as things are happening all
Mm-hmm.
over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And a good chunk of these things actually have nothing to do with your life directly.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Right?
I may feel bad that there's a war going on somewhere, but
Yeah.
is it going to affect me right now? No. Could
No.
it? Sure. But yeah, and so I tell people, I scroll past those things on Facebook. I
Mm,
don't need to read them.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really encourage self-care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I encourage self-care. You've got to take care of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got to manage your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Those, there's so much coming at us these days.
Mm-hmm.
They put our emotions on edge.
Right. Oh yeah.
We're like on edge, so
Mm-hmm.
much anger. And then you look around, there's so much division in our
Mm-hmm.
world right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Right.
And it wasn't like that some 2, 3 decades ago.
No.
I mean, especially you look at the political scene, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a global thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so there's this principle that works when you really you really have to define your
Mm-hmm.
tribe
Mm-hmm.
and you really have to feed them with what they
Mm-hmm.
really, really like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And cut them away from the whole crowd
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it used to happen before, yes, we did that when we
Mm-hmm.
did the campaigns and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. We tried to
Mm-hmm.
find what was wrong with the opponent and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But once the elections were done, then we came together and moved
Right.
forward as a
This is the
nation.
leader for X period of time.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
person was everybody's leader,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right?
Now you could vote them out or vote for somebody different later, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, so these days, it really concerns me because this is what I'm expecting from leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting leaders to divide,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right?
And let's be honest, both of the major parties are doing that. It is not one side or the other.
Not exactly. Like I said, we just found out it is what works.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is so to speak.
Well,
But
yeah, and part of that is it comes back to the media, right? If you say something that's going to get people riled up, it's going to be covered by the media.
mm,
And I think we see that with people and who they're going to post something online that then gets, oh my gosh, and everybody covers it and whoa, don't we feel special today? And again, no specific political, it's
yeah,
happening with everybody. All the way down to, I mean, like I've seen it happen with like school boards, things like that. I'm a PR person. If it bleeds, it leads.
come on.
If it gets your attention, then you're going to read maybe the next article on, wherever. So, we're unfortunately pandering to that. Because it's like, oh, what are they going to say next?
Exactly.
And maybe it's, a celebrity, a sports person, whoever, a political figure. What are they going to say next? And then it's really funny because if they don't say anything, we're like, well, what's wrong with him? Great example. I am not a Swiftie. I'm not a Taylor. I like her music, but but people criticized her because she had this huge, I mean, she does have a huge following, right?
Mhm.
And she didn't really delve into politics.
Mm.
And, and they were like, well, why aren't you saying, who you're going to support and all that? And she's like, that's not my thing. Now,
See?
there are other people who that really is their thing. Okay. But, whatever. But it comes back to what you were saying before. It's personal. We need to take personal responsibility for this.
Absolutely. So this is one major reason why I wrote my latest book,
Mm-hmm.
Shifts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Shifts is actually an acronym.
Okay.
See, hear, insight, formulate, transform, and succeed. And
Ah.
that's a basic principle that runs
Mm-hmm.
through the book.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you see and hear
Mm-hmm.
consistently over time
Mm-hmm.
will enter your heart
Right.
and put your life on
Mm-hmm.
autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking people to take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. We're just talking about the effect of the media.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes the media
Mm-hmm.
powerful
Mm-hmm.
because the media controls or
Mm-hmm.
influences what you see and
Mm-hmm.
hear.
Right. Right.
Once I got that insight many years ago
Mm-hmm.
in the process of wanting to transform my
Mm-hmm.
life, I then took control.
Mm-hmm.
I became intentional about
Mm-hmm.
what I see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I would write a goal on a plain sheet of paper and stick it on the wall in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
I would print a picture out of the internet, stick it on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I would tear a page out of a magazine
Mm-hmm.
that like the future, like there was
Mm-hmm.
one of a motivational speaker and
Mm-hmm.
his wife, and they packed out this
Mm-hmm.
collision with 14,000
Mm-hmm.
people. I was just starting out my
Mm-hmm.
career, right? I
Mm-hmm.
said, this is where I'm going. I tore it
Mm-hmm.
out, stuck
Mm-hmm.
it on the wall in my bedroom. And today those things are my reality.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I didn't want only my present to keep
Mm-hmm.
going in.
Right.
I wanted to give my eyes and ears something that had to
Mm-hmm.
do with my future.
Mm-hmm.
This principle controls the advertising industry.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it $1 billion industry?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you see and hear consistently, it
Mm-hmm.
goes in there, you're going to buy
Right.
something.
Right.
Somewhere along the line. It influences the educational system.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we go to do in school,
Mm-hmm.
see and hearing
Mm-hmm.
every single day.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the movies are powerful,
Mm-hmm.
right? You just see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is that is going in through your eyes and
Mm-hmm.
ears, they never leave you the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this goes back to the need for each of us to take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. The basic rule
Mm-hmm.
here is self-care.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Self-care.
Mm-hmm.
External stimuli is there. What your boss
Mm-hmm.
is doing is there and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But you've
Mm-hmm.
got to take responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. What you
Right.
do outside of your work hours actually influences your progress
Mm-hmm.
much more than the routine
Mm-hmm.
that you
Right.
do during the
Mm-hmm.
work hours.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to your health, your mental health, your
Mm-hmm.
emotional health, your professional growth, what you're reading,
Mm-hmm. Right.
seeing. Associations
Mm-hmm.
matter a lot. We
Mm-hmm.
learn through information
Mm-hmm.
and imitation.
Right.
Your associations, your relationships never leave you the same.
Mm-hmm.
So don't hang around toxic people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Try
Mm-hmm.
to you,
You
you
might
know.
have to have Thanksgiving dinner with them, but
Yes, but then, like we said, you
Mhm.
got to limit the interaction.
Right.
That's part of
Mhm.
it.
Right.
Mhm.
And the other thing, and you mentioned this, is empathy, right? Maybe we're dealing with somebody who is toxic. Well, we can't just be mad at them. Yeah, we probably are mad, right? But what are they going through? Why are they like they are? Now, can you change that? Maybe, maybe not. But you need to understand. I mean, are they like that boss that I had? He had a very low self-esteem. So now this was long enough ago. I did not do this. Maybe, now I was not going to say, "Hey, Bob, you're really fat," right? That no, but maybe I could have done the opposite. That's a really nice shirt. You look good today, right? And now it needs to be real. It can't be that, but we need to understand we don't always know what they're going through. And even if they have told us, we still don't always know what they're going through. And so, and I think that we want to fix them, right? No. Probably not going to happen.
This is a very, very important dimension to it,
Mm-hmm.
the empathy bit.
Mm-hmm.
There is just some reason
Mm-hmm.
why somebody is acting in a
Mm-hmm.
particular way. And you may not know,
Right.
except you are in their
Mm-hmm.
position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, trying to put yourself in their position, that's
Mm-hmm.
what empathy
Mm-hmm.
is
Right.
about.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lesson many years ago when I was just beginning to learn leadership about the people that disrupt meetings.
Mm-hmm.
You are leading a meeting, and that is this person who is always maybe cracking a dry joke,
Mm-hmm.
or always doing something
Mm-hmm.
that disrupts the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned was the likelihood is that the person is trying to get attention,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and that there may be the possibility that they were deprived of it
Mm-hmm.
before.
Mm-hmm.
So that the first thing you should do then is give them the attention.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Call their name during the
Mm-hmm.
meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ask them a question.
Mm-hmm.
They are aware, they feel it when you
Mm-hmm.
call their name
Mm-hmm.
because they know that at that moment they came
Right.
up in everybody's mind.
Mm-hmm.
The meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And turn it into a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them to contribute.
Right.
Right? Pay compliments when they
Mm-hmm.
do something right
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't have to disrupt negatively
Mm-hmm.
in order to get
Mm-hmm.
attention anymore. Because
Right.
some people learn that from childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they were not
Mm-hmm.
given attention, they
Mm-hmm.
just found out the only time they got their
Mm-hmm.
parent attention was when they were knocking something down
Right.
in the house.
Yeah. When they misbehaved, mom, dad would pay attention to them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we said earlier, it's possible somebody experienced
Mm-hmm.
some trauma
Mm-hmm.
or disaffection,
Right.
or somebody is actually
Mm-hmm.
going through something at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. This is
Mm-hmm.
very important for team members.
Mm-hmm.
You also need to show empathy to your boss.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whether they are toxic or not,
Mm-hmm.
people also need to care. Just
Mm-hmm.
remember your boss is also human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And things will be a whole lot easier for you if you also took interest in them
Mm-hmm.
and the things that.
Right. Yeah. And we're not saying, get real detail, but you might say, you've seen a picture of their child in their office. Ask a question about the child. Something simple and basic, again, to show that you recognize they are a human first.
Exactly.
Right. And I always think, give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, granted, at some point that stops, right? But like I was in Chick-fil-A the other day. Now, you and I are both here in Atlanta. Chick-fil-A is, and of course, Chick-fil-A is known for their extreme customer service, all of those things. And so I'm in my car in the drive-thru, and the person behind me had something happen that didn't. And I think what happened was she got her drink and the lid came off and it spilled all over in her car.
Oh,
And she starts screaming at these poor kids at Chick-fil-A
right.
who, and I'm thinking, well, I'm ahead of her in line and I'm in a big pickup and she's in a little car. So, and I didn't have my meal yet, so I needed to stay. But I mean, she was upset at whatever it was.
Mm.
And they took her another drink. I mean, they did whatever they could. Now, what they should have done was they probably should have gone and got a manager. But they've been empowered to deal with
Right.
this on their own, right? So that was very important. But when they finally came up with she's still yelling, then when they finally came up with my meal, and I said, she's having a really bad day. And I mean, that really was, that now, I was keeping my eye on her because I wanted to make sure it didn't escalate and then I'd have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, just knowing she was not having a good day.
Definitely.
Did that excuse her behavior? No. But did it make it a little more understandable? Yes.
Exactly. This is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And it really could be tough sometimes to put yourself in another person's position,
Right.
to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's easier to criticize.
Oh, yeah. I'm good at that.
It's easier to criticize. I read a story in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey many years ago. And he talked about this man who was riding in the train and he had his kids, and his kids were unruly. They were, hitting one another and shouting and so on. And people in the train were irritated. And he was saying nothing, right? Eventually somebody spoke up, said, "Excuse me, sir, control your kids." He said, well, I'm sorry. They just lost their mother.
Mm-hmm. And then everybody's like, oh my gosh, let them do what they want, right?
That just changed everything. They were
Right.
processing grief.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, given the benefit of the doubt,
Mm-hmm.
it's really a whole lot better. I say to managers that serve with me, if somebody is being consistently on time to work, and this one time they came pretty late,
Right.
the first thing to do is not to blow up in anger.
Right. Ask them if there's a problem.
Yes, the first thing to do is to ask. I said, because
Mm-hmm.
if you blow up in anger and eventually they then tell you maybe they just lost somebody there to them and so on, you will feel foolish. But you would also have communicated to them that the job is more important to you than their lives.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you want to flip that, what is going on with them. But yeah, I mean, it's just empathy, love, and it doesn't hurt us to do those. It is so important. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we've talked about this for almost an hour, and it has been such a great discussion. We have to get together for lunch since we're in the same town. We got to have lunch, right? But so if someone is saying, oh my gosh, I need me some Dr. Sam, how do they find you, and what are the services that you provide? Because you have numerous fabulous services.
Thank you so much. So I am on LinkedIn. Just type my name, Sam, Adeyemi. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I am on X, right? And then I'm on YouTube, right? My videos are there, my training videos. I'm a speaker. I speak at conferences all over the world. And then I also go into organizations and help them. I'm a doctor of strategic leadership. So when it has to do with leadership, I'm passionate especially about culture because it has the power to frustrate your goals and strategies and whatever if it's not right. And that's what CEOs should be focusing on, right? My email is info at samadeyemiglc.com. Now, if you want to check me out online, I have a website that leads to all my other websites. And it's just my name, samadeyemi.com. Right?
Perfect. I love it. And we'll have your LinkedIn profile. We'll have that as a link. We've got links to a couple of your books and your company. We have those in the show notes. But yeah, it's I was looking on your website, so many great resources, so many things that you do. We didn't even talk about the fact that you work a lot with faith-based communities, which I think is so very important. But, this really has been such a fabulous conversation. And I'd love to talk with you again, because unfortunately, this is not going away, especially, the toxic part. But people do need to know, how do we become leaders? Even if it's just to get your kids to wash the dishes, right?
Right.
But until we have you on again, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, thank you so much, Deb, for having me with you today. This has been an exciting conversation on leadership. I'd like to remind everyone, everybody can lead. If you don't believe that as a leader, you will not empower the people who work with you, and you won't be able to delegate what you're doing now, so you can move on to more important things, right? And expand your capacity to get results. Leadership can be learned. Leadership can be learned. Make sure you're training someone. Ultimately, the purpose of leadership is not to produce followers. It's to produce leaders. I'll leave it.
I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer, and I've been having so much fun talking with Dr. Sam Adeyemi. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.